This is a bit of a content warning for my listeners. This episode explores some highly addictive subject matter. What might start out as an innocent activity can easily cascade into a lifelong obsession that may not only consume, but change the total trajectory of your life. Listener discretion advised. Let's get into it. Welcome, wisdom seekers, to the Gathering Wisdom podcast, knowledge for the new paradigm, with me, your host, Robin in the Wild. We're living through some truly transformational times, and if you're anything like me, you're craving ways to cultivate a more conscious and soul-driven life. Join me weekly as we explore a rich tapestry of topics, ranging from mindfulness magic, the science behind the woo, tips for sustainable living, and so much more. Together, we can illuminate the path to a brighter future and guide each other to a more empowered, resilient, and juicy life, one episode at a time. Martha Stewart's 1982 book, Entertaining, solidified her status as a lifestyle goddess. But did you know she also played a major role in making backyard chickens trendy? Before Martha, raising chickens in your yard was mainly associated with rural living or a hippie lifestyle. At a time when factory farms were changing the way Americans connected to their food, Martha was building a catering business and establishing herself as a tastemaker for all things delicious and beautiful. Photos of her prized Americana hens, known for their stunning pastel blue and green eggs, graced the pages of her book, and when it hit shelves, backyard chickens became America's it bird, seemingly overnight. Fast forward to 2020, once again, demand for chicks surged. Factory farm closures sent the price of eggs skyrocketing, sending cooped-up families to consider keeping coops of their own. Urban areas have since relaxed ordinances, and the sound of morning clucking is now more ubiquitous than ever in our neighborhoods. And if you aren't already one of the 12 million in the U.S. keeping chickens, today's episode might inspire you to consider opening up your home to a fluffy butt or two, or 3, or 6, or 10, or 12, or 15, or 20, or 25, or 40, or... Thanks again for joining me for another episode of Gathering Wisdom. This week, we're exploring backyard chickens, the homestead gateway drug. When my husband and I finally moved to a place where we could keep chickens, we didn't waste any time. We moved into a family-owned home in the Pasadena foothills in September of 2018, and about a month later, after the dust settled on our move, we immediately started scrounging the Craigslist ads for already laying chickens. Since it wasn't chick season, we opted to skip over the whole chick raising stage, and we jumped right into trying to source some laying hens. And our search led us to a really strange guy's home. And he rescued all kinds of chickens, I guess, as a hobby. He had about 60 chickens in his backyard in what I think was like a makeshift chicken sanctuary. And first-time chicken owners, I don't recommend this for many reasons that I could get into, but long story short, we rescued 4 laying hens that he helped us essentially pick out based on what our needs were. I remember it was a Rhode Island Red, a Golden Orpington, a Barred Rock, and then a very strange-looking cracked out leggy Leghorn. And I guess the Leghorn was used by the county as essentially a mosquito trap. They would they would put chickens out in a field, I guess near Long Beach, where it gets a little swampy in between Long Beach and Huntington Beach. And they would essentially wait for the mosquitoes to bite them, and then they would test the chicken to test them for West Nile. So yeah, I had an experimental chicken, a lab chicken. But, we ate those eggs, and she was a really good layer, and nothing ever bad happened. So we'll just count ourselves lucky on that one. They all looked pretty healthy when we brought them home. And I think we used like a beat up dog crate to bring them home. And then we eventually rescued an old kind of dilapidated chicken coop that we tried to refurbish off of Facebook Marketplace. So the barrier to entry to get into chickens is very low. I think our initial investment was under $200 when it came time to actually getting the chickens and the feed and the coop. And honestly, they just need a safe, secure place to kind of tuck in at night, and they free ranged in our backyard. And, there are risks associated with that, but we were just bootstrapping it because we were really anxious to kind of get the ball rolling on having some chickens in our yard. And we had the space to kind of play and experiment. So, no harm done. But the next thing I knew, a few months with these chickens, they caught a little bit of a disease. I remember they were free ranging in the yard, and it's not like we didn't have hawks. I just didn't think about, we were in an urban environment. So I just didn't really think about hawks being a predator in our yard until one day I was looking out the screen window, and I literally saw a hawk jump one of my chickens, and I ran out screaming, throwing my flip-flops at the hawk until the hawk released the chicken. And I had to nurse this poor chicken back to health. She was fine. She was a little bruised and she had a couple of puncture wounds, but it wasn't anything that I couldn't take care of. But I did find that a couple of weeks later, she developed a cough, and then they all ended up developing some kind of COPD or something. And we made the hard decision to cull the chickens. But we did decide to, I lie. My husband culled them. I nervously watched as he used the cone method to slit their throats. If anybody doesn't know, you put the chicken upside down and they kind of get lulled to sleep. There's multiple methods to culling a chicken, but this was just our preferred method. And he drained the blood, and then we processed them. So we boiled water, and then we had to defeather them. And we did eventually stew them, and we ate them. And like I said, nothing bad happened. So once you kind of go through that process, then, you kind of say to yourself, well, what's next? So at that point, we were making beer. And then right before pandemic, we got into keeping bees. And so all of these little hobbies kind of kept us satisfied during the pandemic. We, like I said in a previous podcast, our life did not change very much during this time. We were just kind of exploring all of these homesteady things in whatever capacity. And now in 2024, we're raising chickens. We've got horses, goats, gardens, soon a baby. And now I'm venturing my way into canning and more fermenting and preserving. And there's just no end in sight. It's just, there's so many things I want to learn and try. I remember during pandemic, I got really into soap making. And I was like, yeah, you pretty much can make anything you need. We don't need the store. We can be self-sufficient on our own. And that was probably one of the coolest, most important lessons that I learned coming out of COVID. Our life didn't change much because we already knew that we had all of the skills and the things required to, get what we needed during that time. And we just learned to live without. If we couldn't get it, we didn't need it. So at this point, my lifestyle has become my hobby, and it not only feeds my family, but when you get right down to it, it keeps us healthy, mentally sane. It feeds my soul. I love doing things and making things with my hands. Sometimes it is a pain in the butt to make everything from scratch. It's also hard to leave your life. You have to be really committed. It's hard to get away. It can be hard to find somebody that you trust who will look after all of your animals as well as you would. But I feel very connected to my life and this style of living. So, I have to say, based on my experience, chickens really are the ultimate stepping stone to a more self-sufficient lifestyle. And you might one day just catch yourself on Zillow looking for properties where you can eventually build your future homestead. So why is it a gateway drug? Well, chicken keeping has a relatively low barrier to entry compared to most livestock. They don't require a lot of space. or maintenance. And with the right environment, you can put a lot of systems in place to kind of maintain them without a big time investment, so long as you are just checking on them every day, because why wouldn't you want to, so long as you're collecting eggs and providing food and fresh water, a place to roost. And they are social creatures. So you do need at least two, because they do get lonely. But why stop at two? Why not just get four? And if you're going to get four, you might as well get six. But I get ahead of myself. So if you start with chicks, you could have laying hens in less than 5 months. The average chicken will start laying at about 18 weeks. So that's about 4.5 months. So if you get your chicks, we traditionally like to get them in either December or early January. And there's a bunch of places you can get them. Your local feed store is probably the most preferred. But if you're looking for something a little bit more fancy, you can do some research and find some chicken raising farms in your local area. We've got a great place. I'm just going to give a little shout out to Dare to Dream Farms, which is located in Lompoc. They have all kinds of rare breeds. You do have to get on the list early. And then we've got our local hay and feed, which also introduces some really cool breeds, but you do have to get on the list. I mean, it gets competitive. You've got to plan it out if you want that special breed to add to your collection. And chicken collecting is just a whole other hobby in itself. There's fancy chickens up the wazoo, and you could spend your Christmas planning what fancy breed you're going to add to your flock. Chickens are a firsthand opportunity to connect with your food. So with industrial ag the way it is, we all know it needs to change. We have to start moving towards a model of connecting to where our food comes from. And if not at the household level, then at a community level, community gardens, backyard gardens. We've got to break this cycle of relying on the industrial ag system, which it could be a whole other episode in and of itself. But chicken farming, it has to be one of the worst culprits. So I'm not even going to get into that here, but I am so picky about the meat I buy, and, I don't buy store-bought eggs anymore for many reasons. Chicken keepers are usually going to be the most popular person in their neighborhood because of the eggs or the chicken manure. I've definitely had people come and take our chicken manure for their garden before, the composted chicken manure. Everyone during the pandemic wanted our eggs, and we kept our family, our extended family, and our community very well fed and happy during those no contact times. Some of the other selling points for keeping chickens. First off, the eggs. Fresh is best. Farm fresh or backyard eggs are actually classified as a superfood. And at around 75 calories an egg, 6 grams of protein, and 5 grams of healthy unsaturated fat. The rich golden yolk is not anything like you'll see in a conventional egg. I mean, the yolk, you can take a store-bought egg and compare it to a backyard raised or a farm raised egg, and the yolk color alone will show you the main difference. And not only that, but the taste is, you just can't even compare the two. One just has no flavor, it's like just egg. So I can understand why people don't like eggs. There's a lot of people I know that don't like eggs, and I never understand because I'm eating my eggs and I just think my eggs taste so damn delicious. The main reason for this, differentiation is their diet. It's what the chickens eat. So remember, what they eat, you're eating. So the more natural and diverse their diet, pasture, bugs, green scraps, organic feed, then the more nutritious the egg. So if you can control what your chickens are eating, then essentially you can control what you're eating. And that is a big appeal for me. And if you're worried about cholesterol, don't, because studies show that backyard raised eggs have far less cholesterol than conventional. And the reason for that is because the chickens are healthy. So chickens being able to free range and have the space and the dietary variety is the biggest reason why you can produce such a healthy egg. Chickens are also what we call compost champions. So I call them my little garbage disposals because they can turn scraps of pretty much anything into manure, which then can either be used to feed your garden or simply like you can just divert it out of the waste stream. So if you live in a state like mine, like California, then you're most likely familiar with the Green Waste Initiative. So beginning in 2022, State Bill SB 1383 requires every county and jurisdiction to provide an organic waste collection system for all residents and businesses. And this is because we have to start diverting our green waste from the landfill. The reason being is that the landfills are becoming a collection of methane gases, which is contributing to climate change. And it's such an easy swap for us to do. So if you're not already composting on your own, or you don't already have chickens, then we really need to talk. Your city should be providing you a way to divert this waste out of your regular trash stream and or compost effectively. And composting is definitely going to be a topic we explore in the future, because there's all ways to do it. There's ways to compost if you live in a small space. There's ways to compost as a community. I know that I used to be on a website called Share Waste, where I would actually accept my neighbor's green scraps so long as it fit a certain criteria. And it would feed my chickens. It would help me cut down on my feed bill. And so I was essentially doing my part. I lived next to some apartments. And so people who didn't have the ability to compost their own scraps would just bring me their green waste. And it kept the chickens happy for that living situation that we were in. So it worked out for everybody. And then another thing is pest control. Chickens love bugs. So if you have an established garden, they really love digging for grubs, and especially like those invasive grubs that like the Japanese beetle. They'll also eat like roly-polies, which will easily destroy some of your smaller plants. So if you've got a place for them to forage in an established garden, and I say established because they will probably eat your smaller greens, you have to keep those little ones protected. They provide excellent pest control because that's what they do, is they go after bugs. Another selling point for chickens is they're funny. They provide endless entertainment. If you heard the chicken clip at the beginning of the show, they sound like little dinosaurs. They are miniature dinosaurs. I have a shirt that looks like the Jurassic Park logo, and it just has a picture of a chicken instead of a T-Rex in the middle, because you can spend hours kind of just staring at them and thinking, oh my gosh, I have tiny little dinosaurs living in my garden. They're also, like I said before, they're social creatures. And so I actually had a chicken at one point. Her name was Millie, and she would come have wine with me on my porch every evening. That was her deal. She just loved to come perch next to me, and we'd have long chats over a glass of wine. She was quite literally my chicken companion. Chickens are great educational experiences for kids. It teaches them responsibility. It helps them connect with nature. Chickens do follow the rhythm of the seasons. So during the fall, they tend to molt. They'll lose their feathers. And so that lets you know that they're expending their energy so that they can grow new feathers. And so typically their egg production slows down. Their egg production also slows down when the daylight hours get shorter. So it's just, it's kind of, when they hit fall, it's just this reminder that it's time to start slowing down. It's time to start gathering our reserves and gearing up for winter. And then when spring comes around, you wake up every morning to just this complete plethora of eggs. Almost sometimes, depending on how many chickens you have, like so many eggs, you don't even know what to do with them. So it's just a really nice way to mark the rhythm of nature and the rhythm of the seasons. And that pretty much wraps up all of my selling points for why backyard chickens, and explains why I personally think they are the homesteading gateway drug, because once you get into the rhythm of caring for these chickens, then you're going to look towards other areas of your life that you want to, kind of incorporate into. I think of our little homestead as an ecosystem. It's a lot of inputs, but like the more you add, the more it adds to your life. So for instance, the chickens, they compost our scraps, and in return, we get the eggs, which helps me connect to my community because I can feed friends with their eggs. And not only that, but they, eat the bugs in the garden. So that saves me time and money and energy on pest control. And then they help also keep the weeds down. And then we have the goats, and the goats keep the weeds down. And then the goats provide companionship to the horses. And then the horses just provide general enjoyment. They're basically beautiful lawn ornaments, pasture ponies right now, since we haven't been riding very much, but they consume the hay, and then the hay produces this rich manure, which then feeds the garden, and it's just a whole cycle. So you're probably going to hear me talk about my passion for my little ecosystem that I'm building a lot. And chickens are a big factor of that. And I think chickens I've always considered them a status symbol, because it represents that I own land where I could keep chickens, because I doubt that there's a ton of landlords that would be, unless you're in a pretty rural area, that would be cool with having backyard chickens like in suburban LA. So it represents just, I own the land they live on. I have the time, energy, and resources to put into them, because it is a small commitment. You are caring for another thing, but it's a reason to get up in the morning. Before we had the automatic coop door, I would let the chickens out manually, and it was a reason to get up and get into my garden and say hello. So I know for Martha Stewart, chickens definitely are a status symbol. She created an entire paint line, her pink color line, around the shades of her Americana blues and greens. And her chickens have always been a very prized aspect of her farm. So if you are now inspired to get your own chickens, do a little bit of research. If you've got any questions, you can reach out to me. And I know that this episode took a little bit of a turn away from the topic we explored last week, but that's kind of how we're going to do it here. I'm just bringing whatever wisdom calls. And this week I wanted to talk about chickens. So stay tuned for next week's topic. And thank you so much again for tuning in. Thank you for joining me. If this week's topic resonated with you, you can help keep the wisdom flowing by following and sharing with a loved one or fellow seeker. If there's a topic you'd like me to explore or to be a guest on Gathering Wisdom, feel free to reach me at hey@robininthewild.com. Until next time, stay curious.